The throne room of Commander Vexhol was a place of absolute power and complete control. The ceiling stretched up 3 stories high, made of dark metal that looked like black glass. The walls reflected cold light that came from 10,000 artificial suns built into the structure. The floor was smooth and hard, polished so perfectly that it looked like water frozen in time. Commander Vexhol stood in the middle of everything. His body was not like human bodies at all. He had 6 limbs that moved with terrible strength and power. His outer shell was thick and hard like armor made of stone. It was the color of night itself. His eyes were different, too. They had no whites. They were just black pupils that seemed to see everything at once. The Krull soldiers around him stood perfectly still. Each one was 9 feet tall, maybe taller. Their movements were exact and controlled. These were not normal soldiers. These were the best fighters in the Krull army. They had conquered 17 different star systems. They had fought battles on worlds that humans did not even know existed. When these soldiers moved, entire planets fell dot in the center of the throne room. A woman stood alone. Her name was Diana Hartley. She was human. She was the captain of a research ship that had come into Krull space by mistake. The Krull had captured her 3 weeks ago. Now she stood here, in this vast room, with energy chains around her wrists and ankles. Diana was not tall like the Krull soldiers. She was 5 feet 7 inches. Her body was small and weak compared to the massive aliens around her. Her skin was light brown. Her eyes were dark and sharp. She had black hair that fell past her shoulders. When the guards had brought her here, she was wearing the uniform of her space fleet. Now it was torn and dirty from 3 weeks in the detention block. Below Dock Commander Vexhol walked down from his high seat. His 6 legs made a sound like metal hitting stone. Each step was slow and careful. He was in no rush. He moved like a god who knew that nothing in this universe could hurt him. The Krull soldiers watched him move. They watched him approach the human woman. The Warlord stopped directly in front of Diana. He looked down at her. The top of her head was just below his lowest eyes. She was tiny compared to him. She was weak compared to him. She was nothing compared to him. Vexhol's mandibles began to move. Mandibles are the hard parts that come down from the mouth. They clicked and moved in a way that showed emotion among the Krull. Right now, they showed amusement. The commander thought this moment was funny. The translation device on the Warlord's chest made sounds. These sounds turned into words that Diana could understand. The machine took the strange clicking and grinding noises and turned them into human language. "Tell me, little creature," the commander said. "Tell me what you think when you stand in front of me. Tell me what you understand about your situation." Diana did not look down. She did not look away. She stared directly at the Krull commander. Vexhol continued speaking. His voice was loud and powerful. It filled the entire room. "Your kind has only just learned to fly beyond your own moon. You are babies. You are children who are learning to walk and talk. And I, Diana Hartley, am something you cannot even imagine. I have conquered 17 star systems. I have brought entire civilizations to their knees. Single soldiers under my command have destroyed planets. Entire worlds have fallen to our power. And yet here you stand alone in a room with hundreds of my elite warriors. Here you stand, bound by energy chains that you cannot break. Here you stand, in the presence of someone who could remove you from existence with just a thought." Vexhol's mandibles clicked even more. He was very pleased with this speech. He had made this speech many times before to many prisoners. The Krull soldiers around the room did not move. They had heard this speech before. They knew what came next. The commander would speak about how strong he was. He would speak about how weak his prisoner was. And then the prisoner would become afraid. And then the prisoner would beg for mercy. But Diana did not become afraid. She did not beg. She just stood there and looked at the commander. "You talk about conquest," Diana said. Her voice was steady. It did not shake. It did not waver. "You talk about power. You talk about strength. But where I come from, we measure these things differently." Vexhal's posture changed slightly. This was unexpected. Diana continued speaking. "We measure strength by what a person will do for someone else. We measure it by how much someone is willing to sacrifice. We measure it by hope. We measure it by love. We measure it by the fact that your biggest weapons and your strongest soldiers mean nothing if the people around you are willing to die to protect each other." For a moment, there was silence in the throne room. Even the Krell soldiers seemed to notice that something was different about this human. Something was different about her words. Vexhal made a sound that was like laughter mixed with anger. "You speak of things that do not matter," he said. "Love? Sacrifice? These are the words of weak creatures. These are the words of things that cannot survive on their own. The strong do not need love. The strong do not need others. The strong take what they want, and they destroy what stands in their way." Diana smiled. It was a small thing. Just the natural way that human lips curve up when a human is happy or content. But in that moment, something changed in the entire room. The air felt different. The lights seemed to change color. The temperature dropped by several degrees. This smile was not the smile of someone who was broken. It was not the smile of someone who was afraid. It was not the smile of someone who had given up hope. This was the smile of someone who knew something that no one else in this room knew. This was the smile of someone who had absolute certainty about the future. This was the smile of someone who could see what was coming, and who understood that when it arrived, everything would change. Vexhal's mandibles stopped moving. For just a fraction of a second, the Warlord looked uncertain. One of the tall Krell soldiers noticed this change in his commander. His name was Kix, and he had served Vexhal for 9 years. "You smile?" the commander said, and there was an edge to his voice now. There was something that was almost like fear. "You smile in my presence? You smile while you stand bound in my throne room? Do you understand what I am about to do to you?" Diana did not stop smiling. "Take her to the detention block," Vexhal commanded. His voice was sharp and quick now. It was no longer the voice of someone who was patient and amused. "I have no more time for this creature." The guards moved forward. They placed their heavy hands on Diana's shoulders. They began to move her toward the door, but as they took her away, Diana turned her head just slightly. She looked back at Vexhal one more time, and she was still smiling. The commander stood alone on his throne. He could not shake the feeling that something terrible was about to happen. He did not understand what it was. He did not understand how a small, weak human woman could make him feel this way. But the feeling was there, and it would not go away. Above the ship, in the darkness of space, 7 carrier ships and 2 battle cruisers began to move closer. They were invisible to Krell sensors. They had been invisible for 17 days, and they were getting ready for war. The detention block was located deep below the main part of the Krell ship. It was a place where they kept prisoners and studied them. The cells were made of metal walls that were 5 inches thick. The doors could only be opened from the outside using Krell technology. There was one guard posted outside Diana's cell at all times. Diana sat on a hard metal bench in her cell. The bench had no padding. The floor was cold metal. The walls were cold metal. Everything in this place was cold and hard, and designed to break a person's spirit. Many prisoners had been kept here before. Most of them had broken within days. They had cried and begged for mercy. They had gone mad from the isolation and the fear. Diana did not cry. She sat very still on the bench. She closed her eyes. She began to control her breathing. In slowly. Hold it. Out slowly. Hold it. This was something humans could do that the Krell did not understand. Humans could control their bodies even when they were trapped. They could find peace even in terrible places. She thought about her crew. She thought about her ship. She thought about the communication she had sent before the Krell captured her. She had sent a signal on a hidden frequency. She had told her first officer, Commander James Hull, exactly what to do if she did not return within 30 days. Hull was a good officer. He was brave and careful. When Diana did not return, he would send the fleet. He would bring every ship they had. He would bring every soldier. He would bring everything humanity had built in secret to fight against enemies like the Krell. Diana smiled in the darkness of her cell. She was smiling because she knew that this moment was coming. She knew that in just 11 more days, the sky above this ship would fill with human vessels. She knew that the Krell would see weapons they did not expect. She knew that Vex Hall's confidence would turn to fear. Meanwhile, on the command deck of the ship, strange things began to happen. The Krell used machines to see what was happening in space. These machines were very powerful. They could see objects from billions of miles away. But suddenly, the machines began to report problems. They reported strange readings that did not make sense. They reported distortions in space that should not exist. Krell technicians looked at the data. They looked at each other. They reported to their commanders. The commanders reported to Vex Hall. The Warlord sat on his throne and listened to these reports. Then he dismissed them. "It is a malfunction," Vex Hall said. "Check the machines. Repair what is broken. And do not bring me reports of problems until you have solutions." The technicians went back to their work. They checked every system. They found nothing wrong. The machines were working perfectly. But the readings continued. The strange distortions continued to appear and disappear on the edge of space around the ship. One of the Krell officers was troubled by this. His name was Kix. He was the same soldier who had noticed the commander hesitate when Diana smiled. Kix was different from other Krell soldiers. He had been given access to files about the human prisoner. He had read about human biology. He had read about human history. KYX learned that humans were creatures that had survived on a world where everything tried to kill them. He learned that humans had massive predators and terrible storms and diseases that could destroy them. He learned that humans had learned to work together to survive these things. He learned that humans would do anything to protect each other. He read the files about Diana Hartley. She was a military captain. She had fought in 3 wars. She had lost friends and soldiers under her command. She had survived things that would kill a normal person. She was the kind of human that did not break easily. Kix brought these findings to other senior officers on the ship. The officers listened carefully. They were trained soldiers. They understood military strategy. And when they looked at the evidence, they became worried. "What if," said one officer whose name was Rek, "what if the human female knew this would happen? What if she was not captured by accident? What if she was sent here as a scout?" Other officers began to speak. They talked about the strange readings on their machines. They talked about how calm the human seemed. They talked about her smile. "She smiled," said another officer named Vel. "She smiled at the commander. I have seen many prisoners. I have seen many deaths. But I have never seen a prisoner smile like that. That was not the smile of someone who was broken. That was the smile of someone who was waiting for something." Kix brought all of this information to the commander. He went to Vex Hall's quarters and requested an audience. The commander agreed to see him. "Commander," Kix said, "I have studied the data about the human female. I believe she may be." Vex Hall raised one of his front limbs. "Enough," the commander said. "I do not want to hear about the human female. She is a prisoner. She is nothing. A creature so small and weak that we could destroy her without even moving. Why are you wasting my time talking about her? Because, Kix said, she knew something. She smiled because she knew something. And those readings that our machines are detecting, they are not malfunctions. They are something approaching us. Something is out there in space, and it is coming toward us very slowly, trying not to be detected. Vexhol stood up, his eyes fixed on Kix. What are you saying? He demanded. I am saying, Kix replied, that the human female was not afraid because she knew that help was coming. She was not afraid because she believed that her people would rescue her. She was smiling because she could see the future, and in that future, everything changes. Vexhol made a sound of anger. It was a low, grinding sound that came from deep in his chest. If there was an enemy force approaching this ship, our sensors would have detected it, the commander said. Our technology is far superior to anything the humans possess. A human ship could not hide from us. A human fleet could not hide from us. You are speaking like a fool, Kix. Yes, Commander, Kix said. I am sure you are correct. I apologize for wasting your time. Kix left the commander's quarters. But as he walked through the corridors of the ship, he made sure to position himself near the sensor stations. He made sure to look at the readings with his own eyes, and he saw that the distortions in space were getting stronger. They were getting closer. Whatever was out there was moving faster now. Whatever was out there was ready to attack Dot in her cell. Diana continued to breathe slowly. She could feel it now. She could feel her people getting closer. She had faith in them. She had known them all their lives. She had trained them. She had fought with them, and she knew that in just a few more hours the sky above this ship would fill with light and fire. She knew that the Krell would finally understand what it meant to face a species that would not give up. A species that would not abandon one of their own, no matter the cost. She smiled again in the darkness of her cell. She was smiling because she knew the truth. The truth was that love and loyalty and the desire to protect your people was stronger than all the weapons in the universe. The truth was that Vexhol and his soldiers were about to learn a lesson that would never be forgotten. They were about to learn what humans were capable of when someone they cared about was in danger. The smile never left Diana's face as she waited for her people to arrive. The human fleet was now only 5,000 kilometers away. To space standards, they were almost touching the Krell ship. But to Krell sensors, they were still invisible. The human ships used special technology that bent light and radiation around them. They hid their heat signature. They hid their radio signals. They hid themselves so completely that even the advanced machines of the Krell could not find them. Each human ship was packed with soldiers and weapons. The two battlecruisers were massive. Each one was 500 meters long. They carried enough firepower to destroy a city on a planet. They carried 90,000 soldiers total. They carried pilots and engineers and doctors and cooks. They carried everything needed for a fighting force that was about to enter its first major battle. Commander, James Hull stood on the bridge of the lead battlecruiser. The ship was called the USS Valiant. Hull was 53 years old. His face was covered with scars from his military career. He had lost his left eye in a battle 10 years ago. Now he wore a metal patch over where his eye used to be. Hull looked at the screen in front of him. On the screen was a visual representation of space around them. On that representation was a small red dot. That red dot was the Krell ship. That red dot was where Diana was being held prisoner. How much longer? Hull asked. One of his officers replied, We will reach weapons range in 42 minutes, sir. All ships report ready. All soldiers are in their positions. All weapons are loaded and ready to fire. Hull nodded. He thought about Diana. He thought about how she had given him orders before the Krell captured her. She had told him to wait, She had told him to be patient. She had told him that when she did not come back, he should bring the full force of the human fleet and rescue her. Hull had questioned this at first. It seemed insane. They knew that the Krell had advanced technology. They knew that the Krell had built their empire through military conquest. But Diana had smiled when she gave these orders. She had smiled and told him that she had a plan. Hall still did not understand the plan. But he trusted Diana. He had known her for 15 years. She had never given him an order that was not correct. She had never asked him to do something that was not necessary. Down below in the detention block, Diana heard a sound. It was faint. It was a vibration that traveled through the metal of the ship. It was barely noticeable. But Diana noticed it. She recognized it. It was the vibration of a human ship's engines at full power. It was the sound of her people, getting ready for battle. She opened her eyes. She stood up from the metal bench. She walked to the small opening in her cell door. She could see down the corridor. There was one guard standing there. The guard's name was Trix. He was one of the younger Krell soldiers, only 4 years old in Krell years. He was nervous. His mandibles were clicking constantly. His eyes were moving back and forth. Something was wrong, and Trix could feel it. All of the Krell could feel it now. The vibrations were spreading through the ship. They were getting stronger. The alarm systems were starting to activate. In the command center, a Krell technician spoke into his communication device. "Commander," the technician said, "we are detecting increased seismic activity throughout the ship. This is unusual. Checking all systems for damage." Another technician added, "I am also detecting a power fluctuation in the sensor array. Something is interfering with our detection systems. I cannot find the source." Vexhall was in his private chamber when he received these reports. He did not like this interruption. He was studying the military records of the human species. He was reading about their wars and their battles. He was trying to understand why humans were so obsessed with fighting over things that did not matter. Humans fought over ideas. Humans fought over land that they could not even own properly. Humans fought for honor and pride and loyalty. These things made no sense to the Krell. The Krell fought for resources and for territory that could be used and controlled. These were things that made sense, but as Vexhall read more, he found something that troubled him. He found records of humans sacrificing themselves. He found stories of soldiers who had refused to retreat, even when retreating would have saved their lives. He found accounts of humans who had fought to the last moment to protect their friends. He found descriptions of humans who had died protecting children and the weak. This was strange. This was alien to Krell thinking. Why would a soldier make a choice that would end in their own death? Why would individual soldiers matter more than the overall strategy of the war? Vexhall closed the documents. He tried to forget what he had read, but the words remained in his mind. The ideas remained in his mind. And when the reports came to him about the strange readings on the ship's sensors, his mind returned to those words and ideas. He returned to the command deck. When he arrived, he saw something that made him pause. There was a look on the faces of his officers. It was subtle, but it was there. It was the look of soldiers who had suddenly realized that they might not win. It was the look of soldiers who had suddenly realized that they were in danger. One of his senior officers, a Krell named Pex, turned to address him. "Commander," Pex said, "the sensor distortions are increasing. We have 17 different readings now. Each one is showing signs of a large mass. The masses appear to be moving toward us in formation. The pattern suggests a military fleet approach." Vexhall felt something cold move through his body. It was a sensation he had never felt before. It was the sensation of real doubt. Real fear. "What are you saying?" the commander demanded. "Are you saying that there is a human fleet approaching us?" "I am saying Pex replied carefully, "that there is something approaching us. And based on the speed and the formation, it appears to be military in nature." In her cell, Diana heard the alarm sound. The alarm was loud and clear. It echoed through the detention block. She knew exactly what that alarm meant. It meant that the human fleet had been detected. It meant that the battle was about to begin. She stood very still in her cell. She closed her eyes again. She thought about the soldiers on those ships. She thought about Commander Hull, with his scared face and his missing eye. She thought about the pilots in their fighters. She thought about the engineers in the engine rooms. She thought about all the people who had come across the galaxy to rescue her. And she thought about something else. She thought about the fact that she was worth this. She thought about the fact that her people believed she was important enough to send their entire fleet. She thought about the fact that humans did not believe in leaving their people behind. The vibrations in the ship were getting stronger now. The lights were flickering. The sound of alarms filled every corridor. Vexhol had returned to his throne room. He sat on his chair and looked out at his assembled soldiers. He could see the fear in their eyes now. He could see it clearly. His soldiers, his elite warriors, his best fighters, were now afraid. What is the status of the approaching force? He demanded. One of his officers replied, "It is confirmed to be a fleet. 7 carrier ships and 2 battle cruisers. They are now at full weapons range. They are requesting that we surrender immediately and release all prisoners. They are giving us 5 minutes to comply." Vexhall looked up at his soldiers. He looked at the fear on their faces. And in that moment, he finally understood what Diana's smile had meant. He finally understood the lesson that humans were about to teach him. The lesson was this: when you take someone from a species that values love and loyalty above all things, you do not just take a prisoner. You declare war on an entire people. You sign your own defeat. The first human missiles fired at exactly 0600 hours, ship time. The missiles were not like the weapons that the Krell had used in their previous wars. The Krell fought enemies that had less technology than they did. The Krell fought enemies that had inferior weapons and weaker armor. These enemies would run when the Krell approached. These enemies would surrender when faced with the power of a Krell battleship. But humans had learned by capturing Krell technology. Humans had learned by studying how Krell weapons worked. Humans had taken that knowledge and improved it. They had made weapons that were smaller and faster and smarter than Krell weapons. The first missile hit the forward section of the Krell flagship. It was a direct hit. The explosion was massive. It tore through 3 layers of hull plating. It killed 234 Krell soldiers instantly. It caused fires to spread through 4 different sections of the ship. The lights went out in those sections. The gravity systems failed. Krell soldiers were thrown across corridors like toys. Blood sprayed on the walls. Then the second missile hit. Then the third. Then the fourth. The human attack did not stop. The missiles kept coming, wave after wave. The Krell defense systems tried to shoot them down, but the human missiles were too fast. They were too smart. They changed direction at the last moment. They evaded the Krell weapons. In the detention block, Diana felt the explosion. The entire ship shook. The metal walls vibrated. The lights went out for 3 seconds and then came back on. Around her, she could hear the sounds of panic. She could hear Krell soldiers running through the corridors. She could hear the sound of damage reports being made. The guard outside her cell, the young Krell named Trix, was shaking. His mandibles were clicking rapidly. He was checking the lock on Diana's cell repeatedly. He was making sure that she could not escape, even though everything in the ship was falling apart around him. Diana walked to the opening in her cell door. She looked at Trix directly. "It is okay," she said in a calm voice. "No one here wants to hurt you. We just want to go home. We just want me to go home." Let me out, and I promise that you will not be harmed." Trix looked at her. For a moment, his eyes showed the conflict inside him. He had been trained to obey. He had been trained to keep prisoners locked up. But he could also see that the ship was dying. He could see that the battle was being lost. Another explosion hit the ship. This one was even more powerful. It tore through the detention block section. The metal floor cracked. The lights went out again. This time, they did not come back on. In the darkness, Diana heard the lock on her cell door open. The electronic lock required power, and there was no more power in this section of the ship. The door swung open. "Go," Trix said in his clicking, grinding language. The translation device was still working, running on backup power. "Go. Find your people. I will not stop you." Diana did not run. She walked out of her cell slowly. She walked to Trix and placed her hand on his upper limb. It was a gesture of thanks. It was a gesture of understanding. "Thank you," she said. "You are a good soldier." Then she ran down the corridor. Behind her, she could hear more explosions. She could hear the sound of the ship dying. On the command deck, Vex Hall watched his empire fall apart. The screen showed the human ships. There were 9 of them. Each one was attacking the Krell flagship from a different direction. The Krell defenses were powerful, but there were too many targets. The humans attacked as one coordinated force. They attacked every weak point in the Krell shield. They attacked the engine sections. They attacked the command deck. "Status report." Vexhol shouted. An officer replied, "2 sections have been breached. The environmental systems are failing in the forward section. We have lost contact with 30% of our troops. The humans are demanding our surrender." "No," Vexhol said. "We will fight. We will destroy them." But even as he said these words, the commander knew they were lies. He knew that the Krell could not win this battle. The humans were too well coordinated. They were too intelligent. They were too determined. One of his officers, a Krell named Rek, looked at the commander with fear in his eyes. "Commander," Rek said, "the human female. She told us that strength was measured by what a person would do for others. She told us that love and loyalty were more powerful than weapons. I think she was telling us the truth. I think she was telling us what we would face." Vex Hull looked at Rek. He wanted to order the officer to be silent. He wanted to deny what he was hearing, but he could not, because he could see it now. He could see what Diana had understood from the very beginning. Humans would fight for each other. Humans would sacrifice for each other. Humans would risk everything to protect their own. And because of this, they were stronger than the Krell. They were stronger than all the weapons and all the armor and all the advanced technology. The greatest power in the universe was not the power of destruction. It was the power of love. And humans possessed this power in abundance. All around the ship, the Krell soldiers began to feel the trembling. They trembled not because the ship was being destroyed. They trembled because they were beginning to understand the truth. These humans were willing to die. They were willing to lose soldiers. They were willing to trade their ships and their weapons to get back one person. One small human captain. One woman. The Krell had never encountered an enemy like this before. An enemy that would sacrifice everything for a single individual. An enemy that believed that one person was worth the cost of an entire military campaign. In the detention block, Diana had reached the upper levels of the ship. She ran through corridors filled with smoke and fire. She ran past Krell soldiers who were trying to maintain the ship's systems. None of them tried to stop her. They were too focused on survival. They were too overwhelmed by the realization that they were losing. She found a communication device. She activated it. She sent a signal. "Commander Hull?" she said, her voice clear and strong despite the chaos around her. "This is Captain Hartley. I am alive. I am making my way to the docking bay. I will meet you there." On the human battlecruiser, Hull heard this message. He felt relief wash through him. Diana was alive. Everything they had done, everything they had risked, it had been worth it. "All human forces," he commanded, "press the attack. Take the Krell flagship intact. We are retrieving our captain." The human attack became even more intense. The missiles came even faster. The Krell ship was being torn apart, but it was still floating. The humans could not destroy it completely. They had to keep it intact because they needed to save Diana, and this was something the Krell could not understand. Why would humans risk so much for one person? Why would they throw away victory to protect the prisoner? The answer was simple. Because she was one of them. Because she was family. Because humans did not abandon their own. The ship shook again as another missile struck home. In his throne room, Commander Vexhol felt the ground beneath him crack. He felt the weight of the truth crushing down on him. He had made a terrible mistake. He had mistaken human weakness for irrelevance. He had mistaken human compassion for lack of strength. And now, he was paying the price for that mistake. The battle lasted 17 hours and 43 minutes. When it was finally over, the Krell flagship was still floating in space. But it was broken. Entire sections of the ship were open to the vacuum of space. The engines were dead. The weapons systems were disabled. The shield generators were destroyed. The ship drifted like a corpse in the darkness. Barely holding together, the human assault teams moved through the ship like ghosts. They wore special suits that protected them from the cold of space and the radiation that leaked from the damaged reactor. They moved from section to section, securing the ship. The Krell soldiers they encountered did not fight. They were broken. They were defeated. They laid down their weapons and surrendered. One section of the ship still had lights and life support. It was the docking bay where the human rescue team was waiting. Diana walked into that bay, covered in dust and smoke. Her hair was singed. Her clothes were torn. There was a cut on her left cheek. But her eyes were clear and focused. Commander Hull was waiting for her. When he saw her, he walked forward and embraced her. It was a brief embrace, just a moment of physical contact that conveyed relief and gratitude. Then they both became professional again. "Are you injured?" Hull asked. "No, sir," Diana replied. "I am ready to return to the Valiant." Hull nodded. He had never doubted that Diana would survive. But hearing her voice and seeing her in person was still something that brought him relief. As Diana and Hull walked toward the docking bay, they passed through corridors filled with Krell soldiers. The soldiers had their weapons removed. They were sitting on the ground with their hands raised in surrender. They looked defeated. They looked like a species that had just learned something that shattered their entire understanding of the universe. One of the Krell soldiers was Kix, the officer who had warned Vexhol about the human threat. As Diana passed him, Kix looked up at her. She looked back at him. For a moment, there was understanding between them. Kix had known the truth. He had known that the humans would never give up. He had known that they would sacrifice everything. Diana gave him a small nod. It was a gesture that said, "You understood. You saw what others could not see." Commander Vexhol was found in his throne room, sitting on his chair. He had not tried to flee. He had not tried to fight. He had simply sat and waited. When the human soldiers entered, he did not resist. He stood up and allowed them to place restraints on his limbs. As he was being led away, he saw Diana standing at the far end of the corridor. The human captain was watching him. She was not smiling now. Her face was neutral, but her eyes held something that the Krell commander could not escape. Her eyes held the knowledge that his reign was over. His empire would fall. Everything he had built through conquest would be taken away. And Vexhol finally, truly understood. He understood that strength was not measured in weapons or armor or the number of soldiers at your command. Strength was measured in will. Strength was measured in the determination to protect those you loved. Strength was measured in the willingness to sacrifice everything for another person. The human fleet departed the Krell flagship 8 hours later. The ship was left under guard by a small contingent of human soldiers. Negotiations would begin soon. The Krell would have to accept terms. They would have to release all their prisoners. They would have to reduce their military forces. They would have to accept that they were no longer the dominant power in this region of space. Diana stood on the bridge of the USS Valiant. She was looking out at the Krell flagship, now floating dead in the darkness. Beside her stood Commander Hull. "We did it," Hull said. "We did," Diana agreed. "But this is just the beginning. The Krell will recover from this. They will try again. They will want revenge. We need to be ready." Hull nodded. He knew that Diana was correct. The battle was won, but the war was not over. There would be more fighting. There would be more losses. There would be more pain. But for now, in this moment, they had done what seemed impossible. They had taken on one of the most advanced species in the galaxy and won. They had won because they had put the life of one person above everything else. They had won because of love. In the detention blocks of the Krell ship, other prisoners were being released. There were humans captured over the past months. There were members of other species that the Krell had enslaved. All of them were being brought to safety. All of them were being saved. A young ensign stood next to Diana and watched the prisoners being brought aboard the rescue shuttle. "Sir," the ensign said, "how did you know they would come?" Diana looked at the young soldier. She thought about the question. How did she know? "Because I know my people," she said finally. "I know that humans do not leave their own behind. I know that we will sacrifice anything, do anything, risk anything to protect each other. That is what makes us human. That is what makes us strong." The ensign looked thoughtful. Then he looked back at the Krell ship. "Do you think they understand now?" he asked. "Do you think they understand what we are?" "Yes," Diana said. "I think they do. They understand that strength is not measured in weapons. Strength is measured in the bonds we create with each other. Strength is measured in the willingness to die for someone you love." The shuttle separated from the Krell ship and began its journey back to the human fleet. In the windows, the other prisoners looked out at the vast armada of human ships. They looked out and saw hope. They saw the proof that someone cared about them. They saw the proof that they were not alone. On the bridge of the Valiant, Diana sat in the captain's chair. This was her place. This was where she belonged. Hull stood to her side. "Send this message to all Krell leaders," Diana commanded. "Tell them that humanity is no longer a species to be mocked. Tell them that we are a species that will fight for each other. Tell them that any attack on human citizens will result in the full force of our military response. Tell them that we will cross the stars to save our own. Tell them that we are not the weak, primitive species they thought we were. Tell them that we are the most dangerous species they will ever encounter, because we are willing to sacrifice everything for those we love." The message was sent out across all Krell communication channels. It was simple. It was direct. It was the truth. And across the galaxy, Krell commanders and political leaders received the message. They read it. They understood it. And they trembled. They trembled because they finally understood the lesson that Diana had tried to teach them on that day in the throne room. They trembled because they realized that they had underestimated their enemy. They trembled because they knew that humanity was a threat greater than any weapon they possessed. Diana looked out at the stars beyond the ship. She thought about the long journey ahead. She thought about the conflicts that would come. She thought about the sacrifice that would be required, but she did not regret her choice. She did not regret the path that humanity had chosen, because in the end, love was stronger than power. Loyalty was stronger than conquest. And the bonds between humans were the strongest force in the universe. She smiled. It was the same smile that had terrified a warlord. It was the smile of someone who knew the truth about human nature. It was the smile of someone who had just changed the future of an entire species. The Krell had made a grave mistake. They had taken a human prisoner and expected her to break. They had mocked her smile and expected her to surrender. They had underestimated the power of human will and human love. And now, they would face the consequences. They would learn what it meant to stand against a species that would move mountains to protect their own.